Hi everyone, this is Zivile and Perception Paradox, and today we're up for a treat. We are going to talk with Daniel Oliver from Capital Cell, who is, I would call him entrepreneur, investor, scientist. So his background is in science and he went to work to make money. The job he didn't like, he got fired. And then he created a Capital Cell. And just because he really saw the problem, he wanted to change the world. And Capital Cell is a crowdfunding platform that really focuses on biotechnology, and it's pretty cool what they're doing. So we kind of covered the topics about his entrepreneurial journey, about the investment landscape, biotech, what's right now happening, and of course, crowdfunding. So tune in, enjoy, and let us know what you think. Real people, real stories, and real challenges that break the status quo. I'm your host, Zivile, and welcome to Perception Paradox. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Perception Paradox. Zivile is here, and today I have a guest who is, I would say, revolutionizing the health sector across Europe. And we have Daniel Oliver from Capital Cell with me, and we're gonna dive into investments and health, basically two major topics that are up and hot in the year within the market. So Daniel, welcome to Perception Paradox.
It's a pleasure to be here. Sincerely, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. My question is, since you are from sunny Spain, where are you tuning in from?
Barcelona. Even in Barcelona, it gets cold that time of the year. So it's sunny, but cold.
Okay. Well, at least you have sun, you know? I'm currently in Vilnius, and actually, the last few days we had sun, so that was great. But all right. So, Daniel, I heard many good things about you and everything what comes about, especially, exclusively, right? Biotech, life sciences, and this whole scene in Barcelona. I spent quite a lot of year last spring and last fall, both in Barcelona, Malaga, and everyone just keeps talking about who is driving the agenda. So I would like to go back to the beginnings. How did Capital Cell start and your journey of building Europe's leading biotech and life science investment platform?
It is actually a pretty decent story, but I'm going to make it quick. Capital
Take your
Cell was
time.
born, it was a personal project that I started in the aftermath of the big financial crash, the one we had in, just to clarify, because we had a few. The big one, the really silly one we had back in 2008, which really hit most European countries up until 2010, etc. So back then I quit my corporate job and I decided that I wanted to do something because I was really, really shocked about how magnificently stupid we had been as a society with our money. So I became very interested in investment crowdfunding because it has many interesting things and some disadvantages, but it has a great thing, which is it allows people to understand and know exactly what their money is doing. So I became interested in that, and I started my own equity crowdfunding platform just like that, without any formal training in finance or entrepreneurship or anything, really. I'm a biologist. But being a
Okay.
biologist, I became very frustrated by the fact that when I started understanding startup investment, I realized that biotech startups have a really, really hard time fundraising, a lot more than other companies. And when I started this back in 2013, 14, it seemed relatively easy for any startups. Anyone who claimed to be doing, the Netflix of gym memberships or Tinder for cats or whatever, seemed to find, €500,000 relatively easily. But people who were developing new drugs to make cancer a non-lethal disease, or ways to diagnose diseases like Alzheimer's, etc., they had a really, really hard time, which was a bit silly because if you look at numbers, biotechnology was, even back then, one of the most profitable investment sectors in the world. So why were people not investing in something that made more money and seemed to have a better social impact? So I became very interested in that. And that's when I created Capital Cell, because I thought that maybe crowdfunding could be useful for that particular type of company. So that's how it started.
Wow, that's basically from the need. So were you working before in your corporate as a biotech scientist, or it was just a regular job and your medical background was in the background, basically?
I've never really worked as a scientist. That's something, a career that I discarded. Right off university, I realized that I was never going to be a scientist because, well, basically you have to work for free a lot before you get to make money. And I couldn't wait to start making money in my life. So I took on a lot of terrible jobs and eventually ended up working for a corporate. So the last job I had was at a company where I was working as a salesman for lab equipment and pharmaceutical production materials. It was really boring, actually.
I can imagine. But look, and then you just quit and went to open Capital Cell, or were you working on that on the side? I think that's one of the questions, no matter from the field, founders, they do have, right? So how should I do? Should I just jump straight forward into the building something new without validation? Should I start it on a side?
I
What
think that
works, but
depends. Sorry, I think that depends largely on your personality. It took me a long time. It's something that I really regret. It took me a long time to realize that after being in 15 jobs and thinking every single time that my boss was a bit of an idiot, I just finally realized that maybe you should be your own boss and be the idiot yourself and see how difficult it really is. To arrive to that realization, I first had to quit my job. So actually, because they asked me, so I was fired. And then instead of looking for another job, or rather, because looking for another job was proving, excruciating. Actually, I think it was also a consequence of the crisis. I tried getting back into the wheel and started sending CVs, but it was just too difficult to get a job. And at some point, I realized that, I speak 6 languages. I have a university degree and a master's and a lot of experience, and I'm not completely stupid. And I realized that I was about to go into the 4th interview for a telesales job paying 17,000 euro. And I just didn't go to the interview and thought, all right, I'm going to do something by myself. So I think it is a consequence of the fact that in many countries, Spain being one of them, being an entrepreneur and creating your own thing is not really something that's in people's minds. And I should have realized that a long time ago, I think. So yeah, it took my sweet time.
that is so cool. And you started that alone, or did you look for co-founders?
I tried to look for co-founders, but I didn't really find any. I did start actually with a couple of people, with a guy called Sergi, that eventually went on to create his own crowdfunding business. So we did start kind of together, but mostly I've been doing this alone. And I think that if there are entrepreneurs out there looking for advice, sometimes it is kind of difficult to find a partner. And I don't think it's so different from finding a romantic partner, maybe because, a business partner, it is a bit of a matrimony. And if you can't find the right person, I think it's better to, become an entrepreneur, a lone entrepreneur, which is not ideal, is better than having the wrong partner for sure. And I think that was my case. So
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't really recommend creating a company on your own because, you get 100% of the responsibility, et cetera, but far better than doing it with the wrong person.
did you have many times to pivot from your initial idea of Capital Cell?
Just once, it started being a generic equity crowdfunding platform in which we did everything. Actually, before it became Biotech, we did what remained as one of the largest crowdfunding campaigns in Europe, certainly the largest in Spain. And it was for a newspaper, for example.
Okay.
So after doing this for a couple of years, maybe we pivoted into becoming Capital Cell and doing exclusively biotech. And then we've been pretty faithful to the original business model and idea.
I love even the name, the Capital Cell. It kind of dictates what you are working on and how you help for the ecosystem.
A lucky one, usually terrible at getting names.
Do you have any examples of terrible names?
Well, yes, and they're so terrible that I'm not going to name them here.
Okay, I'm gonna keep it for the behind the scenes. Anyway, so you started focusing on the biotech and life science. I would call it before it was cool in Europe, right? We started getting all those different grounds and focuses from the funds just quite recently. And now also EU pioneering the agenda to back more biotech startups, which is still, I would say, quite little in comparison to what could be done. So the health tech whole sector is at the forefront in this whole innovation game right now. So from your perspective, what's the most exciting happening right now after so many years of you being involved in biotech and life science? And are we here for long now? Are we finally understood that that's where we should give a focus?
I think in biotech and health tech, you generally have new technologies coming, wave after wave, because it is, long story short, biotechnology is now at a revolutionary moment that sort of mimics what happened with IT 20, 30 years ago, when, technology became cheaper, more available, etc., etc. And then things that were seemingly impossible started to appear. And a bit like, I know that a lot of people understand IT better than biotech, and everybody knows that, we've had waves of things that were the big rage: e-commerce, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, AI, etc., etc. And the same has happened to biotechnology lately. So we've had a number of revolutions, including gene editing, CRISPR, which is something that might resonate with people. We've had mRNA, that's the technology behind the Moderna vaccines, for example, etc., etc. I think that right now, there's a few technologies that are becoming relatively old. I'm going to say old because they're 10 years old, that are becoming sort of mainstream, like immunotherapy, which is one of the technologies that could, move cancer from deadly to chronic. Anything related to mRNA, the different types of RNA, which is a way in which we can change the body's genetic behavior, and obviously anything to do with the intersection between artificial intelligence and healthcare, whether it's artificial intelligence applied to managing patients, hospital management, etc., diagnostic, or artificial intelligence applied to the development of technologies. So asking artificial intelligence to develop drugs, for example. Those are some of the really hot things. And in biotech, technologies seem to be appearing, or revolutionary technology seems to be appearing in waves every 4 or 5 years.
Mhm.
So you're always kind of in danger of being outdated by the next big thing. But I think it is really great that new technologies are finally coming into a sector that, even if you think of biotech as something that's really, really ultra modern, actually medicine has been really old for many, many years. And, if you walk into a doctor's office, you will still see many things that are 100 years old, the stethoscope, the thermometer,
Oh, yeah.
etc., etc. So yeah, it's about time new technologies appeared, and the rate at which they're appearing is amazing.
That's really great. And my question would be from more like biotech and all those life science companies. I've been talking to many people who are involved in this whole health area and have different ideas, from investments to accelerators, etc. And I kind of noticed two camps. One camp is saying, all right, we just have to continue working with the scientists, and then we will teach him how to do business, and the scientists will go all the way. And then we have another camp. Okay, let the scientists do the job, bring the commercial person in, and then it have more chances to succeed also as a business and as a startup. From your observation, spending so many years within this field, have you noticed any patterns? What makes it a successful biotech or another health company?
It is a classical debate, and there are, yes, this sort of two opinions, and everybody's entitled to an opinion, but one of them is wrong. And, I think that my observation, and I think that pretty much the modern opinion about that, is that you can't really expect a scientist to become a successful CEO of a company. It can happen, and it does happen very often, because some scientists are also talented CEOs. But it's basically a coincidence. A scientist can be a great startup CEO, just like he can be, by coincidence, a great chess player or ginger-haired. Because, yeah, some people have multiple talents, but, in general, if you think of it as a society, we have a lot of science stocking up in universities and research centers. We have to get it out of there in the form of, companies that take that to the market. If we trust that scientists, all of them, are going to evolve and become successful CEOs, that is impossible. A few will, because a few have the talent to do it. A few others will because they are tireless learners and they will rise to the challenge. But most of them will just not be capable of doing it or will not be willing to abandon their professorships or etc., etc. So with exceptions, I think that if you want to have a method that always works, it is getting a scientist into a startup to do science and to bring, all the value he can bring according to his natural talents, and get someone else to make sure that the company works and advances towards the market. So I think that is, in general, my experience is that the tech transfer units, or the people who work in universities and research centers in getting science into the market, well, if they're old school and they, still have the views that we had in the 90s, they will think that scientists have to become CEOs. As they become a bit more modern and successful, they typically transition to the other point of view, which works a lot better.
Okay, cool. Thanks for sharing. And how long does it take for, let's say, for the scientist with its patent to become investable? Is there some kind of approx time span, or it really depends what are they working on?
Well, it can depend on the type of technology, but basically there is a transition moment in which technologies are no longer eligible for public funding, basically because grants, etc., are dedicated to funding the generation of science and not the generation of commercial products. So at some point, they kind of exhaust public money and they have to move into something else. That's the point when they become investable. And if at the point where they need more money than, whatever they can get from grants, and they don't get it from private investment, it means that the project is not investable. But that typically, the second a company becomes a spin-off from a scientific center, it already gets some investment in. And what you get is, over the years, a balance that changes from mostly public money and a little bit of private money into completely the other way around. And that transition is typically happening within the first year, 2 years. So it's pretty immediate.
Cool. Pretty clear, actually. What does it take right now to raise money for a health company in today's landscape?
America,
Is
the landscape has really, really changed over the past couple of years. From 2019 to sort of the start of 2022, it was really, really easy, actually. I think that happened in other sectors as well, but for a brief period back then, it was easy to get money, and people were getting large amounts of money. I have to say, at pretty much any crazy valuation. That has really changed. So if you compare it to 4 years ago, the situation now is a lot tougher. But actually, it's pretty much the way it was in 2017 or 18. So I would say that fundraising for a biotech startup right now requires, first, the realization that you can't get grants and you can't get money from venture capital the way you used to. Venture capital has become a bit more difficult to talk to. So, and that is why Capital Cell fills a gap there. Biotech particularity. If you compare it to IT or commerce, fintech, edtech, whatever, the amounts of money you require are a lot bigger, typically. As an example, if you're creating an app, for example, Tinder for farmers or whatever, well, it's easy to create an app. So if you want your minimum viable product and your first bunch of customers, you can get it for maybe 100 grand if you're doing something like that. The minimum viable product for a new drug requires several millions. So just to prove that it works on mice might require 3, 4, 5 million euros easily. The other problem you have is that there are a lot of investors and VCs that are putting money into consumer products, IT, etc., because it generally is a type of business that an economist or anyone who can read an Excel file basically can analyze. If you go into scientific projects, you're going to find that any VC, most VCs in biotech, even for a junior analyst, they need people with a PhD. So funds in biotech are rare. There's relatively fewer of them. Although they have a lot of money, they're typically much bigger than their counterparts in other sectors, but they're rare. They do large investments. It's just math. You have less analysts and more money. you can't really invest 100,000. So typically, as an entrepreneur in biotech, you find yourself sort of lost for options if you're not looking for, 5 million. So for your first 500,000, I think the first thing you have to do if you want to fundraise successfully is realize that you're not going to be capable of talking to VCs, and you have to turn to what the rest of humans use, which is business angels, friends and family, stuff like that. That, for a lot of people in biotech, requires a change of mentality, particularly for those who are very scientific. It requires a shift in talking to people about science. You have to move into talking to people about business. You have to explain to people
That's a
what
big
you're going
shift.
to do, how you're going to make money, and how you're going to solve a problem. I would say that pretty much anyone who's in biotech and who manages to do that, to explain successfully to private investors that his project is an interesting investment proposition, has, a lot gained. With that, basically, you give yourself the chance to knock on the right door, talk to the right people, and actually access money. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors, having a good project, a good team, a good business model, etc. But I think that in science, that change of mentality is the key.
Yeah, wow. So, but then you with Capital Cell, you kind of enter as a crowdfunding platform where everybody can invest who believe in the scientist and the idea.
I think
Uh,
most people who believe in, that want to help science, donate small amounts of money. What we've tried to do at Capital Cell is to make sure that first, we are one of the few specialists in biotech. So we, analyze deals and present to people a select few projects. But those are not just projects that we've selected because the science is good, but also because we think that people will perceive that they are a great business. Potentially, they can make a lot of money. Without that, people are just not going to participate and things like that. So we try to help projects present the information in a way that is understandable for everyone, so that they're, yes, going to believe in the science. Yes, they are going to want to help people with multiple sclerosis or whatever the company is doing. But most of all, most importantly, are going to think, or they're going to understand that they can make money with that. That, I think, is the key element.
okay, this is great. And I have a question from the investment side. So why are we so afraid of all the cross-border investment?
Yeah.
It's getting into the same kind of topic, right? Because with your platform and in general, you also empower people from everywhere to contribute if they believe in the scientists. So it got me now that the cross-border investments. I've been talking recently with many investors when it comes to the deal flow, and I would hear, okay, some of them cannot invest because of the regulations of the fund, but not everybody. Some of them would be like, oh, it's not my territory. I don't feel comfortable.
Yeah, that's that's Europe for you. Europe is a great place. There's, great foods, a lot of languages, which makes it good fun, etc., etc. But it has a few drawbacks, and one of them is cultural. And I think that it's not just that there's a lot of different legal systems. You have no idea how a limited company works in the country that's just 100 kilometers away, and then everything is different. The courts are different, the banks are different. That is something definitely is a bit of an obstacle. I think also as Europeans, mostly whoever is listening to this from any country in Europe, there's a high likelihood that our countries have been at war in the past 200 years. One of the things that I think we've been observing now is that there is an undeniable lack of trust in Europe for other countries, and sometimes not even other countries, parts of other countries. People from northern Italy really would invest in southern Italy if they can help it. Madrid and Barcelona, there are two different places, and people don't really like it. Paris is too complicated for most French, and generally it looks a bit like Europe is a collection of small tribal villages who really mistrust the people from the next valley over, and that's still there. And it's, I think, a bit of a cultural thing. There's another number of factors, such as the fact that most European countries, for example, tax breaks to people to make them more liable to invest in their own countries instead of other places. And there's a general lack of policies across the European Union that are actually facilitating cross-border investment. There are a few, and I know that, for example, there is talk now of creating a limited company that's going to be.
This whole EU Act thing that everyone was buzzing and LinkedIn was firing up.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. In my experience, that is probably going to happen, just like the regulation that allows platforms like Capital Cell to operate European-wide. It's just probably going to take a while. Regulation covering or allowing Capital Cell to operate outside of our country, that was meant to be in 2016, eventually.
So you still cannot operate legally outside Spain?
We can, but the regulation finally came out at the end of 2021.
Okay, so it took quite a few years.
Yes, and after that, for the regulator to actually give a license, took another 13 months. So I really hope that the European Union is going to take measures to facilitate. So basically, banking regulations, certain unified system of taxing or justice that will make people believe that if they invest in a company from Sweden, from Poland, or from Ireland, they understand what's going to happen from a fiscal point of view, from a legal point of view, etc., etc. Because obviously, everybody dreads the possibility of being summoned by a court in, I don't know, Austria or Portugal or whatever. And that probably would advance a lot. We will still be faced with the cultural thing, but I think that this is something that happens everywhere. I think it's an American business angel who once said that he only invests in places he can get to by bicycle, really local, because you want to make sure. A lot of people invest mostly in their own cities, really, which to a certain extent is logical. As a business angel, you want to be slightly involved in the companies. You want to have a link of trust to them because, it's easy to make mistakes and to be fooled. So I think that there's always going to be a certain element of locality to angel investment. That's for sure. As for crowdfunding, so people who go into a platform and put really small amounts of money, I trust that that is going to be, in the future, it's going to become a lot easier. And final example on that, I know that right now we are in we're going to complete our first year of cross-border operations with Capital Cell. And we can see that Spanish people who have trusted us for many years are now investing freely into, if we propose Swiss, Italian, French companies to them, they invest freely. And we are only now starting to see that our new investors from France, Italy, etc., are also starting to do some cross-border investment. So, in the case of Capital Cell, we can be the element of trust. In the case of angel networks, for example, I don't dare saying that there is literally zero cross-border investment, but it has to be pretty close to zero.
It's very close, I think to zero. I've been talking to quite many business angel networks, and the farthest they go is maybe in the region, let's say, I don't know, in the Nordics or the Baltics or somewhere where it's very familiar, similar language and similar mindset. And there are some government collaborations happening, and then that's how they do that.
Basically, I think it's like that. Occasionally, if the CEO, a Swedish company with a French CEO can get investment from a French angel network and stuff like that, but it's really the exception.
So with Capital Cell, you work with different angel networks and also LPs, or how do you operate? What's your business model? Because for me, from outside, what I've been looking into you guys, your activities, you both operate and as a platform and as a kind of the fund as well.
Well, not quite. We don't really operate as a fund. I myself, I'm a partner in a VC as well. That's because I have 2 jobs. And I became a partner at Nara Capital a couple of years back. But it's completely separated from Capital Cell. Yeah. The business model of Capital Cell is that first, the companies that we analyze successfully are only eligible to be on the platform if they are working with a lead investor. Typically, on about 40% of cases, it's a VC. It can also be a business angel or a corporate or something like that. So there generally is a VC or a similar investor in every single operation, but it's not us. Because with that, we also try to make sure that the company has received 2 due diligence, one from us and one from someone knows what they're doing. After that, Capital Cell also operates a number of clubs of business angels. We now have one in Spain, one in France, which is in the process of being created, and one in Italy. So companies then are run through this angel club to see if they have traction and are interesting for people. And after that, we send them to the crowdfunding platform, where although many companies seem to think that we are a private banker, so that we are going to pick up the phone and call people on their behalf, that's not what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Not what I think any crowdfunding platform does. I think the closest comparison would be, like the stock exchange, a platform where you put your company and you make sure that it gets funded. But I think that's something we still have to work on, particularly with scientific entrepreneurs who are very, very used to ask for grants. Then they come to us and they ask us for money, and it just doesn't quite work.
Yeah, it did remind me a bit like I would say curated Kickstarter for entrepreneurs to raise money to be backed.
It is a bit like that, yeah. Extremely curated. I think that we are as serious as a financial company can be. And for the moment, we're doing really, really, really well. Our portfolio has grown in value very significantly, very good numbers, and hope that in a couple of years, we can actually go out and say, that's the amount of money you're going to make or made people in the past. For the moment, we're a bit young to say that, but I think that we're doing things rather seriously.
Amazing. And how do you get your deal flow? Because it seems like you're outside Spain already, as you mentioned. Someone found founders, scientists from Switzerland, and someone from Italy.
We do have a lot, and it doesn't seem to be difficult. I have to say that although we are, for the moment, the largest and absolute leader of this kind of activity in Europe, I'm pretty sure that other platforms like ours are going to appear because there is a serious market needs. So the gap in funding in the biotech sector is really, really clear. The moment you go out there and you say, we're the kind of investor that can get you €1 million for biotech, you're not lacking in customers. There's a lot of people who come to talk to us. Some of them we reject. Some of them reject us because crowdfunding is not quite their thing. But we have no shortage of people who want to talk to us. I would say, particularly in the markets where we're already a bit established, like Spain, France, we have a lot of conversations.
So you mentioned a lot of really positive things about crowdfunding. I see it as a really great way to raise money. And you also at the beginning of our conversation mentions that there are also some disadvantages. What would be some things people should be aware if they would choose going for crowdfunding?
As a company, it definitely should understand that crowdfunding is not a fund. So crowdfunding requires an activity from you and requires kind of committing your company completely to doing this. It is a bit like an IPO. You can't really go for an IPO and do things, half-baked. That I think anyone understands. I'm not really sure that people understand it as well when they go to crowdfunding. So the risk of launching a campaign that is half-baked and that doesn't really work is not zero. You have to be very, very aware of that. For the rest, I think it's probably the best financial product out there for startups in many senses. First, it's one of the fastest because companies that come to a platform, at least I'm pretty sure that all the platforms have similar metrics. On Capital Cell, you're going to have your money in 2 to 4 months, which is getting €1 million, because that's the average of the rounds we do. In equity, in biotech, in 4 months is impossible in any other way. And also, as a member of a VC, it's impossible that we do an investment in less than 6-8 months. Just doesn't usually happen, or ever. It is also very good from a governance point of view, because you're not going to get someone who sits on the boards. You're not going to get someone who demands a lot of things. Actually, one of the things we do at Capital Cell, we're very much aware that companies need their independence because they're going to need to negotiate with VCs after us. We don't want to be in the middle, so we make sure the companies keep their independence. Well, there is another thing that you should probably consider. It's not the kind of investment that is then going to guarantee you a future investment. Obviously, if you go to a VC, they invest today and they're going to reinvest in the future and they're going to help you raise more money. That's not crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is just a bag of money that you get today. Might be some chance of reinvestment, but it does have that limitation. For the rest, I think honestly it's the most competitive financial product out there. Unless you don't want to do any sort of communication effort, you want to be super private about things, then it just doesn't work.
Oh, yeah, totally makes sense. All right, so I have one more question for you, Daniel. You, as an expert within biotech and this whole investment landscape and scene, what trends do you see shaping the future of biotech right now?
I don't know. I really
Fair
don't
enough.
know. It is a sector that grows really, really rapidly. I think over the past few years, it has slowly become a bit more trendy and a bit more mainstream. So I think that biotechnology slowly is going to stop being something purely scientific and move a little bit more into territories that are more mainstream or more popular. I think that obviously I don't think we're going to have another episode like the one we had with the vaccines during the COVID, in which, I recall that after many, many years of talking to people about biotechnology and, staring at blank faces, I recall people, taxi drivers talking to me about viral vectors and, protein capsules and stuff like that, because it had kind of become part of the folklore back then. I'm not sure that that's ever going to happen again, but I think that we're going to see a lot more biotechnology in our daily lives as we move into stuff like vaccines against aging and
I
things
did
like
see that. People say that it's not going to take that long anymore. What, 2050 something that we're going to get that vaccine? Or 2035, I saw the latest one.
There's a number of things
Prediction.
that are technically kind of possible
Yeah.
already, such as deciding what kind of son you're going to have and things like that. But the fact that they're technically possible doesn't mean that they're going to be made available, because there's
Mm.
a number of other limitations. But yeah, from a technical point of view, we're starting to be capable of doing things that are amazing. The vaccine against aging, man, I really hope that we sort out our society before we make that available, because I can see a few issues about stuff like that. But yeah, if not that, then other things are going to become, and probably in vitro fertilization is one of the things that springs to mind. It
Hmm.
has the way in which I think already 10% of European babies are born already come from in vitro.
Yeah.
And, everybody knows someone who's had a son via one of those clinics. And I think that biotech is going to infiltrate into our lives in many more ways over the next few years, but I really have no idea which ones.
Fair enough. It seems like it's in very different directions and different trajectories, and very curious to follow. Like, before we close with the final traditional question, I have one more question for you, Daniel. More personal. You've been sharing right now your journey, your observations, and about how back in, even before 2015, the Capital Cell started its journey together with you. Where is your resilience coming from? Because it sounds now very nice and easy that you became this leading biotech crowdfunding platform, etc. But I see a lot of challenges and how difficult it must have been to go there, to come with this big vision. We're going to help scientists when the rest of the world or the rest of the Europe was not even looking that way with the open eyes. So where is your resilience coming from?
Good question. One of the business angels who invested in Capital Cell once told me something that's quite wise. He only invests in companies where the CEO has his ego at stake. And it's probably true that I think that behind the company like Capital Cell or pretty much any other startup where, you're going to be faced with catastrophes and with really tough situations, etc., you need to have a reason, a personal reason to go forth that is not just making money. And in my case, I think I have that. Well, I mean, whatever it is, each person can have its own, proving that you're right to the world, or making sure that you want to do one thing that actually is completely well done, whatever. And I know that I have my reasons to, you know, see this thing through to the end, and if possible, a positive end. But yeah, you're completely right. I think that I read the other day that I don't know what percentage of companies, startups fail because the CEO quits.
Mm-hmm.
And well, I can be a lot of things, but I'm no quitter. So
Wow, all right. So I have this small tradition in this podcast that I like my guests to ask a question for the audience. So to kind of reflective one, so we can all ponder throughout the day after we listen to this episode. What would be your question to the audience? For all the underdogs who are here to get inspired for entrepreneurship, to learn more, or to get this final push to continue doing what they're doing, even though it's hard.
well, I was thinking the other day that over the years, my philosophy has always been that if you're creating a business that doesn't improve the world in one way or another, I can see how that makes sense. So, particularly for people who are thinking or who are leading a business, they've created a business, how are you improving the world, or how do you want to improve the world? That would be one question. Just popped into my head a couple of days ago.
I think this is great. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining to the Perception Paradox, to sharing your journey, giving us an overview of what's happening in the biotech field. And yeah, it was a big honor to have you here. And thank you everyone who listened for us today. Have a great day wherever you are. Thanks.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot for inviting us.
Kim Staffing, yeah.